Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I'm angry and disgusted that this would happen.
People do not feel safe.
Nanaimo's mayor and safety advocates are fed up after police say a city worker was attacked with a syringe in a public washroom. Plus,
it keeps me busy. And with the cost of living in Canada, basically, but Vancouver especially, the CPP and old age security just doesn't cut it.
Working well past retirement. For many older people in BC, it's a new and sometimes challenging reality.
Sometimes they can really push their physical body to the limit.
And
our family's going to donate $10,000 to the city of Vancouver in the form of Bitcoin.
Vancouver's mayor wants to make the city Bitcoin friendly, but others have serious concerns.
I don't see any notion of consulting with law enforcement on this motion.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Enough is enough. That is the message from Nanaimo's mayor and public safety advocates after police say 2 suspects attacked a city worker with syringes in a public washroom. As Claire Palmer explains, the calls for more security and treatment go beyond the island city.
It's here in the bathrooms at Maffeo Sutton Park on Nanaimo's waterfront, where Mounties say 2 people attacked a city worker with syringes on Tuesday morning. The mayor says the employee had asked some people openly using drugs in the washroom to leave just before he was assaulted.
To tell you the honest truth, I'm going to be afraid to go into this washroom now.
The Nanaimo Area Public Safety Association's vice president says enough is enough. His group has been holding rallies for years demanding action on public safety. Shaw is pushing for mandatory care for some people and wants it province-wide.
Something's got to give. And the mayor of Nanaimo has been saying that over and over again, too. We're blue in the face. We're sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of talking about it. Let's have some justice.
Mayor Leonard Krogh says the victim is recovering and calls the attack disturbing.
Frankly, I'm angry and disgusted that this would happen and that individuals feel comfortable in attacking a city worker who's asked them to stop using drugs openly in a public washroom.
People in the park say while the attack is upsetting, they won't stop visiting.
And it's kind of disheartening that we as a country, rich in so many ways, would have these things happening in a home.
Well, I can see that some people would be afraid to go in there. I mean, that's where I was heading, actually, to tell you the truth, to go in there. But I know a lot of people are afraid, and it's unfortunate because it's a great city.
Nanaimo RCMP stresses most people in the city don't need to be afraid.
I totally understand why people get scared by stranger attacks because makes us all feel unsafe. But the bulk of crime that we investigate is crimes against people who knew the person that they assaulted.
Mounties are asking any witnesses to contact them as they try to find the suspects. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Nanaimo.
A new report is looking at how seniors are faring in BC. The province's seniors advocate says while older residents are living and staying healthier longer, challenges have emerged when it comes to caring for them.
We are not even maintaining service levels year over year. In fact, they're getting worse. We are going backward in several very important areas.
Levitt says seniors are facing shortages of long-term care beds, rent subsidies, and housing. He says it's also getting harder for seniors to get home care. Roughly 1.1 million people over the age of 65 now live in BC. And for many of those seniors, working past retirement has become a reality as the cost of living keeps growing. As Mira Baines shows us, it's a challenging road for many.
Seniors in BC are estimated to make up 25% of the population by 2036, meaning more pressure on government services to keep up. That as seniors are facing higher housing costs and grocery bills as the cost of living stretches their budgets.
The calls we get in, seniors who are forced, even at the age of 70, to go back and find work just to be able to keep their homes. Their Uber drivers get into maintenance, cleaning jobs. sometimes they can really push them physical body to the limit.
1 in 4 seniors in BC earns less than $23,000 a year, an amount that falls below the poverty line, according to the province's seniors advocate. Ed Bowe returned to the workforce despite retiring with the help of a Metro Vancouver nonprofit, Mission Possible.
It keeps me busy. And with the cost of living in Canada, basically, but in Vancouver especially, for the price of food and rent, everything else, it's, you know, the CPP and old age security just doesn't cut it.
He maintains downtown Eastside parklets and works about 25 hours a week with no plans to quit.
Probably part-time until I die, because I couldn't sit in my apartment 24/7. I'd go nuts. It just sort of gives me a purpose.
Mission Possible says it is seeing more people above the age of 65 looking for employment.
We've had about a 56% increase in seniors signing up for our programs just over this past year.
But there aren't job opportunities for all of them. For those the organization can help, he's mindful of the training they may need and type of work that would suit them.
We've got people who use mobility scooters. We've got people with different challenges physically. And for us, we're trying to tailor our services to be able to create opportunities for them as well.
Although the employment may be necessary, he says it's key for seniors to be in the community where they live and do meaningful work. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's Police Complaint Commissioner has now called a public hearing into the conduct of 7 Vancouver police officers after the death of Miles Gray more than 9 years ago. Gray died after a struggle with police in Burnaby in 2015. Officers were called after Gray confronted a woman for watering her lawn during a drought. He suffered ruptured testicles, a broken voice box, a fractured eye socket, and widespread bruising. 7 officers were accused of abuse of authority and 6 of neglect of duty, but all 7 were cleared earlier this year after an investigation under the Police Act. That report's author noted the limits of his probe, which included few witness statements and no cross-examination. The head of the OPCC hearing will decide if there was police misconduct, but won't determine whether criminal charges ought to be recommended. Minority advocates are calling on the BC government to address systemic racism within the public service. As Pinky Wong reports, a new report finds a stark pattern of underrepresentation of Indigenous and racialized employees in that sector.
Community leaders gathered on International Human Rights Day to urge the province to do better. A report from the BC government from May reviews a breakdown of racialized communities in the public sector. It is the first of its kind to show statistics on Indigenous and racialized representation in BC public service. The analysis is based on more than 30,600 public service employees as of January 2022.
Public service that is 80% represented by non-Indigenous and non-racialized people cannot carry out an anti-racist mandate. This has been underscored within the Filipino community.
The report finds that 10 of 16 Indigenous and racial groups had little to no representation at the executive level, including those who identified themselves as Métis, Filipino, and Korean.
Representation alone is not going to solve systemic racism. We have to look at, are these temporary jobs, are these precarious jobs, or are they full-time positions? Are these people in positions of leadership and decision-making roles, or are they in lower level positions where they don't have a voice?
The report finds that the majority of Indigenous and racial groups are underrepresented in management roles. On the contrary, they are overrepresented in lower level jobs. The group wants the provincial government to take accountability and identify the barriers for Indigenous and racialized people to get into the public service. And that includes the union representing government workers.
One young girl, and she was in this program where she could work in the government for a year, and they moved her around, but after that experience there was no job. Oh, thank you, we ticked the box. You were in the government, you got to get the experience.
They emphasize the importance of having a seat at the table.
Government has to take a role in explaining what benefits there are to have the diversity of people around the room. It's not enough to say we support EDIA and this is our policy, and you see it everywhere. There has to be real action against that.
The BC Public Service has said it is committed to removing systematic racism from its hiring practices and plans to work with communities. Pinky Wong, CBC News, Vancouver.
Vancouver City Council has directed staff to come up with a Bitcoin plan. Pushed by Mayor Ken Sim, it could allow residents to pay their tax bills with the cryptocurrency. But as Chad Posset explains, there are concerns the plan does not address worries about the digital currency.
Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim believes strongly in investing in Bitcoin and wants the city to do the same. He's even willing to put his own money into the idea as a donation to the city.
Our family's going to donate $10,000 to the city of Vancouver in the form of Bitcoin. We totally believe in the benefits of this, and we're putting our money where our mouth is.
Sim's idea is to have staff explore how to integrate Bitcoin into the city's financial strategy, such as accepting tax bill payments from residents and holding some city reserves in Bitcoin as a way to preserve purchasing power, guard against volatility and inflationary pressures. Around 36 speakers showed up at City Hall to cheer on Sim's idea. Most are actively involved in Bitcoin, as is the mayor.
My name is Mike Kitt, representing Netcoins. I'm a proud resident of Vancouver, and I support this motion.
We cannot deny this is the fastest growing asset in the last decade.
My name is Gary, here today to support the motion. I've been a Vancouver resident for 20 years and Bitcoin advocate since 2011.
All the enthusiasm, however, has some serious hurdles to overcome. For starters, according to the province, local governments currently have no legal means to hold financial reserves in cryptocurrency so that government funds are not exposed to undue risk. Then there's concern over Bitcoin's own volatility, its use of electricity and climate change, and connections to money laundering.
I don't see any acknowledgement or concern about money laundering in the substance of this motion. I don't see any notion of consulting with law enforcement on this motion.
In the end, Sim's motion passed 6 votes to 2, so staff will now come up with a Bitcoin strategy for Vancouver and present it to councillors in the spring. Then they'll have another vote on actually moving on a Bitcoin investment. Chad Posset, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Silkatine First Nation is working with Ottawa to develop a permanent salmon conservation hatchery in its territory. The First Nation is host to 3 salmon-bearing watersheds, including the Chilcotin, Chilco, and Tesico rivers. This summer, a landslide blocked the Chilcotin and prevented the Silkatine from harvesting fish. Once built, the hatchery will be managed by the nation, which says it will help bring back wild stocks. Darius Madavi is here with our look at the weather, and you're tracking a system.
Yes, and you can see it coming up there. I was worried it was going to be too dark, but you can see.
There it is.
Fortunately, it
almost looks like my pocket square.
Yes. Oh, there you go. Fortunately, which I'm hesitant to use that term, but it's so strong that you can actually see the red quite clearly there. It's a fast-developing, strong low that's going to be moving off the south coast. So expect to see that really start to ramp up on Friday. You're seeing stronger winds and bands of heavy precipitation at times on the south coast. For now, enjoy one more day of relatively calm weather across BC, especially again here on the south coast. Quite cloudy, maybe a bit showery, but nothing too excessive. But once we get into Friday, here you can see those showers randomly popping up on Thursday. Once we get into Friday, that next stronger wave of precipitation moves in. So expect some snow on the mountains and rain everywhere else.
Okay, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
The historic Kamloops Red Bridge collapsed in a massive fire in September of this year. Mounties have said they're investigating it as an arson. The bridge, a vital link over the South Thompson River, was loved by many. And during the election, David Eby vowed to rebuild it. Now an artist is turning parts of it into art, hoping to honor its legacy. Have a look.
My name's Casey McCauley. I'm a local print-based artist here in Kamloops. I've created a series of prints from the Red Bridge, from the salvage after the bridge burnt down. Here's the red piece on white paper. You can see all the character in the tree with the branch whorls.
The bridge was really significant to a lot of people as a landmark, and the way that it burnt down was so dramatic, and it sort of left this iconic residual feeling in a lot of people from around here. Because I'm a print-based artist anyway, and I print trees that burnt from wildfires, this is just an extension of that work. If you can imagine a segment cut of a tree like a cookie, if somebody was cutting firewood or something like that, you usually see the rings on the end, and when I print them, just like a stamp, you get to see the rings really prominently portrayed. In this case, you can see all the weathering around the edges of the tree. This was part of the pier, the foundation of the bridge, that sat there for almost 90 years.
It is a big cut, but it comes with a caveat. After the break, why the Bank of Canada chose to lower its key lending rate and why we might expect caution moving forward. Stay with us. For its now fifth rate cut in a row, the Bank of Canada has slashed its key interest rate. It is now 3.25%. The bank signaled it could be the last big cut for a while, and it comes with a warning of uncertain times ahead. Peter Armstrong has more.
The Bank of Canada is trying to thread a particularly slim needle. It wants to get rates lower, but it doesn't want markets to freak out. So once again, it cut 50 basis points, but it added this caveat.
With the policy rate now substantially lower, we anticipate a more gradual approach to monetary policy.
The question is, what does gradual really mean?
Well, we've just cut by 50 basis points at the last two meetings. So more gradual is more gradual than that.
Tiff Macklum's answer is deliberately vague because he sees what you see. Per capita GDP has fallen 6 straight quarters. The unemployment rate is rising. Economists say gradual doesn't mean the rate-cutting cycle has come to an end.
Canadians are going to see even more rate cuts ahead.
Canadians have been clobbered recently. Inflation drove up prices. A slowing economy is eating into economic confidence. So even if those 50 basis point cuts are behind us, economists believe rates need to come down to help navigate the stormy months and years ahead.
RBC sees the Bank of Canada cutting rates down to 2% by the end of next year, believing that the economy is going to need more than just neutral, but a little extra support over that horizon.
That's welcome news to variable rate mortgage holders.
It probably dropped by about $250, $300 a month, so it's definitely a relief there.
Roman Oshipkov saw his mortgage in Red Deer nearly double when rates took off. That extra money helps, but costs are up across the board.
Fuel costs are up. Costs to food for kids and formula and diapers and all that stuff is up. So it's really not that you can buy extra stuff.
And now the economy is facing new threats from incoming U.S. President Donald Trump and his proposed tariffs. And we still don't know what will be targeted, by how much, or how Canada may respond.
So it is not just a cloud of uncertainty, but a very pernicious fog over the entire visibility of the Canadian economy.
The Bank of Canada meets again on January 29th, just a week after the new U.S. president takes office. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Now, as we heard, that cut from the Bank of Canada is very welcome news to mortgage holders and would-be buyers, especially here in BC. But even those keen to see their monthly rates go or payments drop say they're worried about the economy. Michelle Gassoub has more.
A 50 basis points cut by the Bank of Canada to 3.25%. Welcome news for first-time homebuyers.
I'm going to be getting one soon, actually. I think that's great.
Okay, so this is good news for you.
Totally. I think it's a great way for the Canada to go and get things back to normal.
This cut, one of several over recent months.
We got a new house. Yeah, he's a spoiled little man.
Basically, it started to drop over the summer, and we were happy with that rate, and so we decided that's enough. So we need to get something rather than wait around for perfect everything.
So how much will you actually save or be able to afford?
If you have a $200,000 mortgage, you're going to expect your payments to go down by about $60 a month, which is great. Also on the flip side, for those sidelined, like I mentioned earlier, you're in a position now to qualify for an extra $45,000 to $50,000 in mortgage borrowing power.
It's good news for those facing big monthly payments, but the optimism is cautious.
So hopefully the rates coming down will affect my payments next period when I renew my mortgage. But I mean, our economy is not doing well.
That concern is shared by industry experts.
They're making these cuts because the economy is in a tough spot. As much as we are excited for the relief, we do have to keep in mind that, this is happening because the jobs numbers weren't great.
Unemployment is up, the Canadian dollar is down, and with concerns over what will happen when Trump takes office, there's more economic uncertainty ahead.
The big unknown is what's going to happen with regard to any potential tariffs emanating from the U.S., because that has to factor in.
More cuts are expected into 2025. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Surf's up in Tofino. The view from the Long Beach Lodge caught some hardy surfers taking on the waves. 10 degrees on the west coast of Vancouver Island in the afternoon. Darius Madavi has your BC-wide weather forecast. An iconic art display in Vancouver may get a new home. City Council is looking at moving the East Van Cross from its current spot at Clark Street and East 6th. ABC Councillor Mike Klassen's motion says a nearby development is making it harder to see the landmark, and it needs more visibility.
I don't think people really appreciated what kind of resonance that piece had. It became really almost symbolic of, the working class east side of the city, and a lot of people love it. And I feel like it never really got its due in terms of where it was put. I think it was a bit rushed, put in just before the 2010 games.
No specific location has been put forward. Klassen says it would cost about $250,000 just to move the piece. But there would be more costs if the city is looking at preparing the area around the cross. Several types of made good granola bars are being recalled over concerns they may contain metal fragments. The company that owns it is Made Good is voluntarily recalling 12 varieties, including chocolate chip and strawberry. All of the products were made between January and November of this year and sold in Canada, the U.S., and other countries. The company says it has fixed a manufacturing issue and that the bars can be returned for a refund wherever you may have bought them. In the face of continued tariff threats from incoming President Donald Trump, Canada's leaders say they are united, and Ontario's premier says they need to be ready to fight. Kate McKenna now on what retaliation could look like and the growing efforts to put pressure back on America.
The Prime Minister went into the call with Canada's premiers with a plan, and the premiers came out swinging.
We need to be ready. We need to be ready to fight. This fight is coming, 100%.
Sources say the Prime Minister laid out broad strokes of a new beefed-up border strategy.
We asked for more boots on the ground for our CBSA officers and our CMP officers, and they agreed.
And obviously a priority will be to share details of this plan with the incoming Trump administration and with Canadians in the coming days.
It's an all-hands-on-deck response to Donald Trump's threat to slap Canadian goods with a 25% tariff over concerns about the border.
The tariffs that they've proposed at 25% would be devastating to the Canadian economy.
Ottawa's already pledged more helicopters and drones. Provinces offered law enforcement resources, both aimed at stopping illegal crossings. And sources say Trudeau also discussed the fight against fentanyl, something Trump brought up repeatedly when the Prime Minister visited Mar-a-Lago. Justin Trudeau has also floated retaliatory tariffs.
We will, of course, as we did 8 years ago, respond to unfair tariffs.
Ford took that further, threatening to stop Ontario energy exports.
We will go to the full extent, depending on how far this goes. We will go to the extent of cutting off their energy.
Premiers have also been key to the diplomatic push to convince Trump to change his mind, meeting with American governors and appearing on American TV, saying tariffs will be bad for both countries.
It's hurting the American people. It's hurting the Canadian people. Why the president is doing this is beyond me.
Quebec Premier François Legault met Trump last weekend in France. He's now calling for a costed border plan, tighter visa rules, and to negotiate a new free trade agreement now and without Mexico. How much this will cost for now is unclear. Sources have said Ottawa is prepared to spend up to $1 billion on border security, spending that could be approved before Donald Trump even takes office. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
The two sides in the Canada Post workers' strike appear further apart than ever. The company released a statement today saying the union's latest offer would add billions of dollars in unsustainable fixed costs. As Alexander Silberman reports, stuck in the middle are many people anxiously awaiting essential documents, from social service checks to passports.
My package was delivered to this very postal location.
Yi Ching Huang tracked her passport to this shuttered Toronto post office. It's stuck inside with no way to get it, and a trip for her wedding reception is just weeks away.
It's devastating at this point.
Huang is a permanent resident with a Chinese passport that contains visas that are challenging to replace. And there's no resolution in sight after the latest proposal by the union, delivered Monday, was described as a setback by Canada Post.
I feel sorry for the workers. They have to go on strike at this point of the year, but then it's also very frustrating for people like us waiting for important documents.
While Huang is currently out of luck, there are some options for Canadian passport holders. Service Canada has held about 185,000 passports since December 1st. They're available for pickup for an extra $20. But it's not just passports.
We think that all options should be in place.
While some federal benefits, including the Canada Pension Plan, are still being delivered, most provincial program checks need to be picked up. That's troubling to this advocate.
Certainly for people who have mobility issues or distance issues, it becomes a real barrier to getting what are absolutely necessary benefits for survival purposes.
Canada Post says mail stuck at distribution centers like this one will be delivered on a first-in, first-out basis when operations resume. But it adds Canadians will continue to feel the impact of the strike long after it's over. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Regina.
The case of an Ontario elementary school teacher accused of sex offenses against numerous students was back in court. Thomas Dagla has new details about the charges she's facing and reaction from the community.
On the first week of the school year, police showed up at the home of a grade 8 teacher now accused of sex crimes against multiple students. Barred from her workplace while she's on unpaid leave, Kellyanne Jennings is facing 20 charges.
I would say as a sexual assault investigator, it is rare.
On Wednesday, Jennings' lawyer appeared by video link as a court heard her case will play out well into the new year. A teacher at this Ontario Catholic school, the 40-year-old is accused of misconduct with at least 4 minors, and police suspect there may be more.
Sexual offenses of this nature involving a teacher, that's very concerning to every aspect of the community.
According to court records obtained by CBC News, Jennings is accused of sexually assaulting a boy under 14 in April, and weeks later she allegedly produced child pornography, purportedly involving pictures and video on a platform like Snapchat.
Police say Jennings broke her bail conditions twice in October by attending places like this where children are likely to be. She was then released on bail again, and this time she is allowed to come to locations like this as long as her own children and her surety are with her.
No one answered when we stopped by her home, and Jennings' lawyer declined to comment on the case. This smiling yearbook entry reads Mrs. Jennings' #1 rule is respect yourself and others. A parent of one former student told CBC News she was shocked and at first hoped it was all a terrible misunderstanding, calling such allegations damaging for any community. This expert says sex crimes by women often go unreported.
The question is it more underreported than sexual offending by men? We have no idea.
The allegations against Jennings have not been proven in court. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Port Hope, Ontario.
As the official start of winter inches closer, people are getting ready for the colder season, and so is BC's wildlife. Now, some animals head south, others hunker down here. But others you will see out and about all throughout winter. Here on the South Coast, that includes some hummingbirds. Darius Madavi is here with more on how those birds survive the winter so far north. Darius, what's their secret?
Come on, Dan, I'm not going to give it up that easily. First, let's cover what species we're actually talking about. Now, BC is home to 5 hummingbird species: Rufus, Anna's, Calliope, black-chinned, and ruby-throated on the eastern side of the Rockies. But of those, only one spends the winter here, Anna's hummingbird. This is Anna's hummingbird. If you live on BC's coast or parts of the interior, you've probably seen them around in the summer. But if you're in the south, you may continue to see them even on the chilliest days of the year. And not only do they stick around, they stay active. These birds aren't hunkering down in a cave and hibernating the winter away, although, as Lee Gass told me, they do have a related trick up their sleeve.
Torpor is the same idea. Turn the furnace down. Like that's what we did in our house when I was growing up. Furnace always went down to 55. Why? My parents didn't want to pay for the fuel to heat up a house where everybody was sleeping. Well, it's the same thing for hummingbirds.
That's a great metaphor. So if you see an Anna's hummingbird flitting around in the winter, don't panic. They're probably doing just fine.
That is good news. Now, some people claim they don't remember seeing hummingbirds in the winter when they were kids, Have they always been around here, at least on the south coast?
No, actually, they're absolutely right. Anna's hummingbirds were not always here in the winter. In fact, they used to really just be confined to Southern California. A century ago, that was the case. Now, Gas told me this was really already starting to change in the 60s when he was a student. They started to creep into Oregon, and in the decades since, they've continued to make their way further and further north. You can see, take a look at this map of their range. You can see they're up and down the coast now, and if we zoom in to here in BC, again, they spend the summer up and down the coast, but not so much, they spend year-round here down further south. Now, a lot of species are experiencing stuff like this because of climate change, but this is much more extreme than the shifts most species are seeing. And experts say it's because of how we're changing the landscape of the West Coast. We're planting more exotic flowering plants and giving them new sources of nectar. Now, Gas says he's still noticing the shift around his home on Quadra Island in the Salish Sea.
Like I mixed up some food for them this morning. Well, they'd never been here till this year, even though people 1.5 kilometers away had them year round for the last 20 years.
Darius, if the hummingbirds stick around here because we're feeding them, does that mean we need to support them through the winter?
This touches on a really important point. Now, I think every winter I see at least a couple articles about making sure the Anna's hummingbird survive the winter and how important it is to keep your feeders topped up. And I think this comes, at least in part, from the fact that when most people hear hummingbird, they picture a tiny, colorful bird fluttering around a flower. And I mean, we saw that in a lot of these photos. It's true that they love nectar. They are fantastic pollinators. So in the winter, with no flowers around, people think surely they will starve to death without our help and our feeders. But luckily, hummingbirds are tougher than we give them credit for. Some of BC's species, like the rufous hummingbird, migrate thousands of kilometers a dozen times in their lifetime. And all hummingbirds can stomach a lot more than just sugar.
They love sugar. They love sugar in gardens. They love sugar in the woods. And they love sugar in feeders. But that's not all they eat. So they'll catch bugs. They clean out spider webs. They get the spiders and the bugs that are in the spider webs. They'll pick things up off the ground. I've seen them do that.
With that being said, keeping your feeders topped up with sugar water certainly won't do the birds any harm. In fact, Gas recommends upping the sugar to water ratio to 3-to-1 in the winter to help them really pack in the calories. So if you set out a feeder this winter, it's a win-win. You'll have some very appreciative hummingbirds coming by, and you get to look on and appreciate your new feathered friends.
Fast moving, too. Darius Madavi, thanks very much.
Thank you.
A look at Malibu in California, where thousands of people are still under evacuation order as firefighters battle a fast-moving blaze. More on the Franklin fire coming up. A major wildfire fanned by strong winds continues to burn out of control in Southern California. But changing weather conditions may bring some relief. Steve Futterman is in Malibu with more.
Today, finally some good news, as for the first time, firefighters are beginning to get the upper hand on this blaze. Early this morning, some fresh new fighters. With tools in hand, their job today was to help establish a fire perimeter to stop the fire from spreading. Overnight, there were huge hotspots engulfing dry brush which hasn't burned in years. Water-dropping helicopters worked around the clock. And all this work paid off. This morning, fire officials announced the fire is now 7% contained. Not that much, but...
I mean, 7% is 7% than better than yesterday. Obviously, the weather is cooperating. That plays a huge role in our containment efforts to get that fire line put in.
The winds haven't completely gone away, but they have greatly diminished. Still, the fire continues to grow, although much more slowly now.
This house is gonna go down, bro.
At times, the flames seem overwhelming. There has been damage to homes and other structures. The numbers, though, are quite low. And there have been some nervous moments.
Oh my God, I can smell the smoke.
For the unlucky ones, they have to now assess the damage.
Sparks and embers blowing everywhere, and you think the world's coming to an end.
Another sign that the worst may be over, today students at Pepperdine University were no longer required to shelter in place. With finally some containment and weather conditions improving, especially the winds, fire crews are more optimistic than ever that they are getting the upper hand. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Malibu, California.
Darius Madavi joins us with our BC-wide weather forecast, but we're going to jump to the East Coast with some very busy weather there.
Yes, I feel like it's been a while since we've visited other places with the weather, and this is exciting enough that I think it's worth it. Here you can see a feature that looks very much like an atmospheric river we get here on the West Coast. That stream of moisture coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, bringing, again, a lot of moisture, but also the warmth from the area, which is why we're seeing a lot of rain and not just snow coming down. It's also coming along with this very deep low pressure system. You can watch it develop very quickly here. People might think this looks pretty similar to when we had that very intense, fast developing bomb cyclone here on the West Coast a couple weeks ago, and it's very similar. It's developing fast enough to qualify as that same type of weather event. Now you can see all the warnings we have across the board, very big variety of warnings in eastern Canada. You can see all that precipitation coming in, again, rain eventually transitioning to snow further west. And we can also take a look at the winds, which I want to highlight especially because we have our own fast developing, strong low pressure system coming to us here on the West Coast. You can see here that low developing, bringing those winds closer and closer to the shore and probably reaching us on Friday into Saturday. Now, at this point, the models have sort of come to an agreement that this will be a strong storm system, but they have not yet agreed on where exactly we're going to see the strongest winds and when exactly they're going to arrive. So more information coming up. But in the meantime, know that Friday into Saturday seems like it's going to be quite active here on the South Coast. You can see a few showers popping up tomorrow across the coast, especially the South Coast, but then that bigger system comes in on Friday, spreading some snow to the mountaintops and some heavy precipitation pretty much everywhere else, and snow then spreading into the interior. And temperatures will be low enough that many places in the interior will be seeing snow, not just on the ridge tops, could be reaching the valley bottoms at times as well. Although mountain passes, most likely as usual, to get a big dump of snow. Temperatures, not too much exciting happening in the south, maybe dropping a little bit as we head into tomorrow, but up in the north as we get into the weekend, temperatures will start to plummet as some air moves in from the north, even further north. Conditions across the province tomorrow, we have one more relatively calm day in the south. This is really just chance of flurries, chance of showers in the south, as well as actually in the north. It's pretty similar. And if we take a look at our 5-day forecast, again, tomorrow is a little bit of a calm day still. Finish off the week with a little bit more activity. Rainy, gusty conditions continuing into Saturday as well, Dan.
That's a lot of graphics. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Just days after the toppling of the Assad regime, Syria's transitional prime minister is calling on the millions who fled the brutal civil war to come back home. The unrest is far from over, though, as rebel forces move to consolidate their hold. The CBC News team is on the ground in Syria. Margaret Evans looks at the cautious optimism among civilians.
Well, Israel has said it is moving into, there's a buffer zone between the Syrian Golan Heights and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, and there's a buffer zone that has been manned by peacekeeping forces over the years. Israel has moved into that area and said that it's doing so to protect itself. It's worried, it says, about the potential of militant groups who still exist in pockets in Syria getting a hold of the big weaponry, the arsenal that the Syrian government had, including chemical weapons. They have been striking targets in Syria again and again and again, including the Syrian Navy along the coastline. The other big concern is the fighting in the north between Turkish-backed opposition groups and U.S.-backed Kurdish groups. Turkey believes that those Kurdish groups harbor separatists from Turkey who want to work towards Kurdish separatism or independence in Turkey. It is not, these two groups have clashed for a number of years. The Kurds have autonomy in the east, the south, the northeast of the country. They're going to want to hang on to that. They have been very instrumental in the defeat of ISIS, and as I said, they do have U.S. backing. We did hear that the clashes in one of the cities that had been held by the Kurds, Manbij, there's a ceasefire there, but it seems to involve the Kurds withdrawing. And Kurdish people in Aleppo, in other parts north of Aleppo, and armed fighters there did leave when the Turkish-backed opposition groups started to move their way. So, you know, it's a reminder that there are a lot of uncertainties still in this country.
The CBC's Margaret Evans reporting from Damascus. Now, Palestinian officials are reporting dozens of deaths in Israeli airstrikes today in northern Gaza. Israel says it was targeting Hamas militants in the area. That news comes as the UN again raises concerns about Israel's handling of that war. The CBC's Tom Perry reports from Jerusalem.
The UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories once again has some harsh words for Israel.
I'm burdened by having to yet again explain the unbelievable amount of suffering and grief the Palestinian people have endured in the last year for crimes that member states have the clear responsibility of preventing, stopping and punishing, among which is genocide.
Israel has consistently denied committing genocide in its war in Gaza. It says that it's Hamas that launched a genocidal attack on October 7th, and it says Israel has been defending itself within the bounds of international law. Now, there has been a lot going on in Gaza today. Palestinian health officials say that 33 people were killed in northern and central Gaza, the majority of those in Beit Lahia, where it says 22 people, including women and children, were killed when the IDF hit a multi-story building. Now, the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, told Reuters it was targeting Hamas, operating near a hospital there, and it disputes the numbers. We're also hearing reports today out of Nusrat, where Palestinian Civil Emergency Service there says at least 7 people were killed in airstrikes. So on the other side, we're hearing about 4 rockets coming out of Gaza. That doesn't happen as often anymore, but 4 rockets being fired out of Gaza, 2 being taken out by air defense, 2 landing in an open field, causing no injuries. The IDF, it's reported, has been telling people in the areas from where those rockets were launched to evacuate, and that often means that more airstrikes are on the way. Tom Perry, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, an entertainer and a mentalist, the amazing Kreskin has died. We take a look at his life and legacy after this.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox.
December 6 kicked off CBC's Make the Season Kind, supporting food banks in British Columbia. Thank you to all who have already donated generously and made a difference. The charity drive continues until December 31st. To find out more on how you can give, head to cbc.ca/kindbc. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
The entertainer known as the Amazing Kreskin has died.
He mesmerized generations of TV watchers with his tricks. Magda Gabrisalasa describes his magic.
In the prime of his career, the man known as the Amazing Kreskin mystified audiences, entertained fans of all ages, and became the model for generations of future mentalists.
There you are, ladies and gentlemen, the very card you thought of.
George Kreskin Jr.'s interest in appearing to read people's minds was sparked at the age of 9, followed by years spent honing his craft, using psychology and body language to read people's thoughts.
It's the unconscious, really, that's 90% of our thinking, and that's what I tap into.
More suggestible in groups.
In the 70s, he lit up TV screens with shows like The Amazing World of Kreskin. Shot in Canada, it also played in the U.S.
I still have my Kreskin board game.
Fellow mentalist and magician Daniel Paulin grew up watching Kreskin.
I can't read your mind, but I'm going to make you think that I can. And I don't think there was a better person, a better master at the ESP and mind reading than Kreskin.
His talent was a big draw for late-night talk shows. The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson had him on nearly 90 times. He popped up on David Letterman's show, too.
Talk show hosts love guests who come to entertain. It's like a night off for them. And so Kreskin was the perfect guest because he had his act and people were amazed.
Comedians like Jim Carrey did impersonations of the mentalist.
It just would grow into total manic, insane energy. And it used to crack people up.
The social media post announcing the entertainer's death stated performing for all of you brought immense joy to his life, and it was something he deeply cherished. The Amazing Kreskin was 89 years old.
Goodbye, everybody.
Magda Gabrisalasa, CBC News, Toronto.
90 times on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Slight exposure there, amazing.
I feel like the only person who was on more was Johnny Carson.
Well done.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. We'll see you then.